Eva Humphreys here. I'm a band registered nutritionist and I have teamed up with Good Hemp for a series of educational videos. This one takes a look at nutritional factors that may allow us to stay fuller for longer. Now, you may be thinking, what a random topic to cover, but actually, food cravings can seriously hamper our capacity to stay healthy. Making a few dietary changes may just be the ticket to keeping fuller for longer and reducing those food cravings. Let's take a closer look at the ins and outs. Feeling full comes from obtaining the correct combination of nutrients. This means getting macronutrients such as carbohydrates, fats, and proteins, and also micronutrients like vitamins and minerals. The idea is that we get enough of both to be able to fuel our bodies and to feel really good every single day. Much of our recent understanding for drivers as to why we seek out specific foods comes from this study on a baboon that lives in South Africa called Sally. Scientists followed Sally for a period of 30 days and they tried to really figure out why she picks specific foods, what she eats, and what that looks like across the month. What they found is that although her daily food intake varied, week on week and across the month, she really hit protein, carbohydrate, and fat targets very specifically and very evenly. By looking at the data in more detail, they concluded that there are 5 distinct appetites, one for carbohydrates, one for fats, one for protein, nothing new there, but then also there were 2, one for calcium and one for sodium, that were a little bit more surprising. This is less surprising if you consider survival. We actually need both calcium and sodium to survive. These nutritional factors still guide the way that we crave foods and what kind of foods that we crave. The same scientists that studied Sally went on to conduct a slightly different experiment in that they took 10 people and popped them in a chalet. They then allowed them to have food from a buffet, but there was a slight limitation in that one buffet was high protein and the other buffet was high carbohydrate and high fat. What they found is those that were eating the low protein or high fat, high carb buffet tended to eat more calories and more carbohydrates. This was in an effort to really compensate for the lower intake of protein. They were virtually seeking to eat until they could fulfill that protein portion. So they were overeating carbohydrates and fats in order to compensate for the lower intake of protein. This finding isn't entirely surprising because we need protein. In fact, our entire body is made up of protein. All of the structures like our skin, our bone, our nails, our hair, our internal organs, our muscles, they are all protein-based, as well as our red blood cells and our immune system. Protein is really vital to the makeup of the human body, and unless we meet the right amount of it, we will keep seeking it until we find it. The study on the left-hand side looked at protein from a different capacity. They looked at protein in terms of satiation, and what they found is that protein is the most satiating macronutrient out there. We do know that there is a little bit of variation between processed and minimally processed protein sources, but by and large, having protein in a meal is crucial for us to keep fuller for longer. A different study conducted in Scotland looked at the effects of hemp and buckwheat on levels of satiation in comparison to meat protein. What they found is that both hemp and buckwheat were really successful at keeping participants fuller for longer. But there were also some really, really neat findings if you dwell deeper into the research. This is slightly scientific, so I'm going to try and break it down for you as much as I can. Hemp really shone because it reduced hunger hormone much more than buckwheat or meat protein in the study. This is kind of crucial because have you ever experienced cravings after you've eaten food? Of course, we all have. That is down to the hunger hormone not disappearing entirely fully. We want as low level of hunger hormone after we've eaten as we possibly can do. Otherwise, we'll likely reach for other things after we've eaten. With hemp, hunger hormone levels were the lowest. Another aspect of this study was that glucagon-like peptide 1, or GLP-1 for short levels, were increased after consuming hemp. This again is a really good thing because from obesity and insulin resistance, we know that post-meal GLP-1 levels were low. This is not a good thing. We want GLP-1 levels to be higher, and that was the case with hemp consumption. On the whole, these findings are really promising, and there is nothing stopping you from throwing a handful of hemp seeds onto whatever you may be eating. It goes with both savory and sweet dishes. There's a twist in the road of food cravings and feeling fuller for longer, and that comes down to breakfast. Let me just debunk this myth now. Breakfast is not the most important meal of the day. It is actually what you have for breakfast that really matters. On this study featured here, they compared eating a high carbohydrate breakfast versus a high protein breakfast. And what they found is that those that consumed a high protein breakfast tended to feel fuller for longer, but also it reduced sugar cravings later in the day. This is huge. So really what they were saying is eating a high protein breakfast was key to reducing sugar cravings later in the day. Part of the reason behind these findings may be down to the relative digestion and absorption rates of different foods. We know that carbohydrates break down really easily. So for processed carbohydrates like a bowl of cereal, it may take as little as 30 minutes for it to go through your system. After it has gone through our system, we feel really hungry again. And the first thing that we will start craving is more carbs. Carbs are really quick access of energy. On the other end of the spectrum, we have proteins and fats, which take much longer to break down. In fact, they can take up to 4 hours, a little bit more in certain cases, depending on how much of it you have eaten. The real answer here is to consume mixed meals to ensure that the meals that we're eating contain a good dose of protein. They also contain some healthy fats and some carbohydrates together. So in the case of the cereal, adding a handful of hemp seeds will bump up the protein content, and adding something like a hemp protein powder will increase the total protein again. Obviously, the better answer would be to ensure that your meal contains protein, but also that it contains vitamin and mineral containing foods like fruits and vegetables. Finally, it would be worth noting that gut health also plays a big role in food cravings, but this is an entirely new topic and is actually covered in another video, so make sure to check that one out next.